and good evening. I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of the Columbus Report. I'm Jason Grisgorek, Waycross Community Media's Government Access Coordinator, being able to bring to you the people that are important to the state of Ohio, especially your district. Tonight's district, the 29th, with Representative Lou Blessing. Mr. Blessing, glad you could join us.
Thank you, Jason. Glad to be here, but easy on the important part.
Okay, all right. We'll make it a little more casual, as always. Glad that you can join us as well. This is being our first discussion of the new year. Welcome back to the 29th district. Obviously, we did just go through some election. Tough season for you, I know. We'll discuss that. But let's look back at the first term. The first term is gone and done. If you were to look back today and say, I did what I was supposed to, or I did what I expected, would you be able to answer that with a yes or a no?
Absolutely, although I would point out that things are a lot different than when I first got into office in terms of expectations and things that you want to do. I mean, I've actually kind of transitioned we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, to, okay, I want to hear what the people want to do. I want to, negotiate and work with the other side. I want to, just make small incremental changes that aren't going to, really just get people ginned up and cause problems.
Do you think that came from the political changes that are going on within the state, or do you think that's in a sense something that you internally started to see as you began working within your department?
I think it came about as I worked with more of the folks in Columbus and in Cincinnati. Really, what I kind of started to realize, with the exception of obviously a few big ticket items, that we're on the same page with a lot of things. And when I did try to do, large, big ideas, not that I would necessarily drop the bill, but start fleshing it out, I realized that, there'd be several massive interest groups that would fight against me. There'd be a lot of citizens that would, scream, this is really bad. And it's like, okay, well, we'll hold off on all of that.
Would you say that most people would look at the name and obviously think of your father and what went on? Do you finally feel that you're out of that shadow?
I think so, yes. Although, having the same name, some people would probably disagree.
For sure.
But yes, I think I am out of that shadow. And but at the same time, I take a lot of the same approaches that Dad did. Mm-hmm. I think he, being a very respected member of the General Assembly in his 30 years there, I've taken on a lot of the things that he's done, his mindset, his way of doing things, because quite frankly, they worked. Mm-hmm. You don't get elected, as a legislator for 30 years without doing some things right.
Right.
So yeah, but there are other things that I have done differently. I know that Dad was big into gambling law and public utilities. Public utility stuff, I'm on the same page with him on that.
But, yes.
But I've gone into alcohol law a little bit more, election law. He was never really, I don't think, on committees that dealt with that so much. And now finance, which is rather new. Mm-hmm. I don't think he was ever on finance, but I don't think that was because he was not given the opportunity. I think it's just because he knew you're listening to quite a massive volume of testimony, and it's easier to listen to other people on that committee and take it in on your own time as opposed to having to actually sit there for it. So he was smart. I just wanted to learn the budget process a little more. So that's one of the reasons why I branched off there.
Well, and we will definitely be touching on that
sure.
later tonight. Looking at being as part of a political family, obviously you probably saw some of the things that your father went through, but do you feel that it is completely different from when his tenure happened? I mean, obviously political views change. Political climate changes.
Yes.
I'm interested to see if, obviously he probably guided you at certain points and said, I won't tell you what to do, but good job.
Yeah.
Or, and not to say that he was behind the scenes saying this is what you do. I don't believe that at all. I believe that he was there as an encouragement, not as...
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. The climate is definitely different, and I would say that one of the big things that changed the climate, and when I say climate, I mean camaraderie, knowing people, mm-hmm. Working with institutions, is term limits.
Sure.
Now legislators have at best 8 years, and it's tough to really in that time get these lasting relationships that some of these members that had been around for decades were able to cultivate. You know, you talk about other political families, for example, the Mallorys. I think William Mallory served from 66 to 94.
Yeah, I mean, it was
almost 20 years, or almost 30 years at that point. And he, you know, like Dad, was able to get to know the lobbyists, was able to get to know the people in the agencies, get to know, you know, an entire generation of people working in Columbus. And when you do that, you tend to know where people's minds are. You tend to be able to work a little bit better with the other side, work a little bit better with your own side, because you know these people very well. And that kind of has been lost at this point, and especially, you know, with the term limits and with other things, it seems to be a little more partisan publicly. Privately, it's really, I don't think, as bad. But you know, we live in a world of term limits now, so that's just one of the drawbacks.
It's very interesting that you had brought something up about that, about cultivating ideas and cultivating those relationships. You know, we had seen how it worked, and be it as it may, as you said, term limits kind of come in. Do you, other than the relationships that it's forming, do you think term limits have caused any other unrest, so to speak? I mean, maybe not unrest is probably not the best word, but just some unease that made it a little bit easier to make things happen in the State House?
You know what, I would have to say yes. I would argue that there's fewer, I'm trying to think of the phrase to describe this, policy area experts. When you serve in the legislature for 30, 40 years versus, you know, 4 to 8, you know, you can pick an area and become an expert in that area. So if somebody is big into healthcare policy, they might become a Medicaid expert, which I would point out is an extremely complex and difficult area to become an expert in. And those sorts of people were able to, you know, calm people down in caucus and say, look, this policy does this, there's nothing more, there's nothing less to it. I feel like now when people just get there, it's all about you know, you look at the budget bill, you look at some of these healthcare bills, they're very big. And they look at it and they think, okay, where are the gotchas? Where are the things that are going to make me look bad, and I'm going to vote on it and the voters are going to hate me? That's generally not the case. It's just that it's complex, and when you don't have those people there to explain things, you know, it hurts. And a lot of times, you know, the staff isn't, you know, there's a lot of turnover with staff. I mean,
that's a very valid point. Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of the staff, you know, are paid X. If you know, go work for a law firm or a lobbying firm elsewhere, Y is quite a bit higher than X, so you lose, you know, the people that are the most knowledgeable fairly quickly. There's a lot of turnover because of that, so they're not there. I have long held that one of the things that needs to happen for both the Republican and Democratic caucuses, whether you pay them or not, is have some former legislators that have been around for decades, you know, just actually be in the room. So when they discuss legislation, that person can say, you know, here's what we did back in 1993, and here's why we did it, and here's how this is similar, and this is good, but this is probably bad. You might want to hold off on that. It might solve a lot of problems behind the scenes before, you know, you find yourself on the House floor like, oh my God, what are we doing?
It sounds like more like an aide or a you know, an advisor, so to speak, maybe like an advisory commission, so to speak.
Yes.
It sounds like a wonderful idea to be able to tap into the resources that you've had at a moment's notice. A lot of people may not stay around, and they may go elsewhere.
Correct.
To be able to have that brain trust, so to speak, it would be a great way to go back and not only answer those questions that may seem puzzling, but be able to be a little more polished when presenting and bringing something new to the table.
Absolutely.
Looking at the last term, it sounds like, you know, obviously the one surprise may be coming from you that you said is that most people are really on the same page, that everything is actually there. There's not a lot of this turmoil. Would you say there are any other surprises that you found when finishing this first term of yours?
Second term, actually.
Second term. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
It really, at the end of the GA, I would say that you know, I was pretty surprised by the volume of bills that were pushed through in lame duck, and it's not necessarily a knock against anybody. And a lot of them were very benign. You know, when people see, oh my God, this many bills were rushed through, you know, the last couple months of the General Assembly, there's some reservation. But I can assure you a lot of them weren't controversial. A couple of them, however, were. As you know, the heartbeat bill officially made it through the General Assembly and was vetoed then by the governor. And House Bill 554, which dealt with the energy mandates, going from mandates to goals for a couple years, was also vetoed. And there was some discussion about, possibly overriding a veto around through Christmas. But, you look at the vote totals in both the House and the Senate, it's like, we just didn't have the votes for it. Not public utilities. The House Bill 554 bill, that again dealt with the mandates. I think it was 56 Republicans in the House that voted for it and 18 senators Republican. Wow. To pass it, and you need 60 and 20 in order to override it, and it's just there was no support for that. Yeah. So, yeah, it was a little hectic, but for the most part, it went well.
Good, and which brings us to the election season that you just went through, such the rigorous time that was. This time around, no opposition. Was that a surprise to you?
Absolutely, it was a surprise. Although it doesn't really mean that I have to say, all right, well, I can put on the sandals and the swim shorts and see everybody after I'm done at the beach.
Yeah.
Part of campaigning isn't so much that it's okay. You have an election in November. Assuming you don't have a primary, you start in March. That's not how it works. I look at it as really just campaigning year-round. If somebody asks me to go to an event or speak or do something in the district, I make a point of doing it. Something like this is a good thing to go to.
Exactly.
And in addition, if there's something that my office is involved in, or we think the voters need to know about, we'll do a monthly press release. And of course, occasionally just go out and talk with the voters. Now, granted, you can't meet every voter in the district. I mean, it's 116,000 per district. But if you get a good subset and people feel that, hey, you're involved in the community, you're accessible, you have a tremendous legislative aid, which I do, and Kelsey Romanchik, for those viewing, if you contact my office, that's who will answer. Actually, now Maria Rimmel, now that I'm officially a chair and have a constituent aide, really work through these constituent issues, and people appreciate that. They know where the help was coming from. It's, you've got to do that year-round. You have to put in the time. You have to put in the effort.
Obviously, you can go as the idea of campaigning is a 24/7 idea. Not only are you working for the state, you are working for the district, and you're working towards the representation of those people. Obviously, since you did not have what I would consider the true combat between or anything, did you feel that you already said you didn't have to kick back? There's never a kickback time. But did you feel like there was anybody coming up and say, this wasn't right or this wasn't it? You felt that opposition, so to speak, not from an opponent, but from your constituents.
Absolutely. I get constituents that will, whether it's actual mail or email, will send in that, hey, we don't particularly like this. It usually isn't something that comes out of the blue. Usually there's a legislative initiative, and they'll get wind of it through an interest group. I remember the heartbeat bill, which I did support. A lot of the people that not necessarily involved with Planned Parenthood, not to single them out. There's other groups.
No, there are other groups, but it's easy to identify.
Right, may have at some point look through their website, agree with them, and you'll get an email blitz from those sorts of people that will say, look, we think the heartbeat bill is a mess. We don't want you to support it. And then it becomes up to me whether, okay, I'm gonna vote for or against it. I have the input. And keep in mind, there's on the other side of the aisle saying, no, you absolutely must vote for this. And there were alternatives. I mean, there was the heartbeat bill, and then there was the pain-capable bill, for example, that Bob Cupp voted on, carried. And as I would point out, all the Democrats voted against the heartbeat bill, I believe. There might have been one or two. But the pain-capable bill did get some Democrat support. In fact, our current county commissioner, Denise Treehouse, voted for that. So it's to what degree, how far do you want to go with this sort of thing? And I think most people are doing the right thing by emailing, contacting your representatives, because otherwise, if we don't get that input, we're assuming, okay, well, this is what we're going to do.
Right. And the reason why I ask is, are you getting that influx or at least some type of communique between your constituents and you here? Is, we've obviously gone through what I would consider a unique change in political views, and that people are finally becoming more aware of what's going on. And it not only goes from a national level, it goes to a state level and goes to a very local level.
Yep. And
because of that, I was always concerned and questioning, does that make a difference? And hearing from a representative saying, yes, it does. These people are calling, people are making a difference.
Oh, absolutely. And people need to also, I think, in general, I know that with this past election, as polarizing as it is, and there is definitely a body of evidence that say that, the legislature, not necessarily in Ohio, but at least at the federal level, is becoming even more polarized. At the end of the day, nothing is really written in stone. Just because you lost, that doesn't mean you've lost forever.
Right.
As a Republican, I remember 8 years under Obama is our president. Trump will be president for 4 years. Mm-hmm. But the more important thing to do is for people is to change what they can change. You can't change who's officially the president at this point. What you can do is become more informed. You can actually look at things in an objective manner and move forward with your questions. And most times I think that the representatives are listening. I've had constituents call in, for example, about Section 8 and have complained and complained and complained. Section 8 is destroying the neighborhood. Well, let's take a look. Let's first of all, let's verify that they actually are Section 8, and if so, what is the recourse that you have? Mm-hmm. If the tenant is very bad. So I had my aide go through the process with HUD, and it turns out there is a process that you can go through, and they will enforce it. If you have somebody that's really destroying the house, destroying the neighborhood, there is a means to an end with that. You just have to look for it, which means a lot of extra work, but that's how it goes sometimes.
Well, sometimes you have to put in that extra legwork to get to the end result.
Yes.
Whether your side, someone else's side, what have you.
Absolutely.
So if we were to look at last term, as we have, and we've gone through everything, what would you say is your shining accomplishment from the last term?
Oh, of course, entertainment districts.
I thought that's where we were going to go. Obviously, a shining moment for the entire county and for the district. Yes.
Although they have failed to implement them. Although
I was wondering about that, though.
Toledo did.
Okay.
And Toledo has had quite a bit of success with that. And for the viewers, what it does is it just creates an outdoor area in a nutshell. Where you can have open container with all the rules and regulations that are in place for safety, sanitation, so on and so forth. But as I hear, Toledo has it's done quite well for them.
Great.
So now, granted, I think they've only had one summer at this point to implement it, but we'll see how it goes going forward.
Well, yeah, I don't expect them to be outside right now. That's just one thing for there, and that's great. I mean, it does make progress for our area, and hopefully, again, something that started right here that has affected us statewide.
Absolutely.
So I look forward to seeing the implementation as it goes forward.
Sure.
So obviously that brings us to 2017 and the new season and the new year. 4 committees that are one chair that you will be. That's over the House Government Accountability and Oversight.
Yep.
Was that a shock to you, or were you vying for this?
Well, I did vie for it, and I know that last year I was the vice chair of that committee up until around September, October, something like that. When actually it was a little bit before that. Representative Tim Brown of Wood County, actually took a job with, I cannot remember the name. It's a governmental group in Toledo, and very good position. So he stepped down. I asked if I could be chair for that committee and was given the honor to do that. And then, of course, this GA, I once again asked, can I still do this, and was given the honor. Although some people might say that's not necessarily an honor. Is the secret about that committee is that it is the Speaker's Committee, in that a lot of bills will go there to do one of 2 things, either be fast-tracked or to really not get a hearing at all. Now, that having been said, it does have some areas that it's, other than the leadership initiatives from both chambers, House and Senate, it has 2 areas of interest, alcohol law and election law. And we really haven't done much with election law recently because, you know, you have what we were doing. We had numerous court challenges there. The opposing party was holding the White House, and of course, through that, the Justice Department. This GA might be different, I don't know, but with that particular area of law, we're going to look for a lot more bipartisan support because there are some things that need to be done that is going to make it cheaper and easier for Board of Elections to do their jobs.
Well, last year we were looking at some reform, slight reform, and things were changing in the way voters could register and things of that nature. It's just inevitable that would start to tighten the belt, so to speak, to make things a lot more easy. And I think hopefully by doing so would ease people's minds because, again, we're still in that era of, I don't want to call it fear, but that idea of that voter fraud, and that's been really ingrained in our minds that's what's wrong with everything in the election.
I agree with you. And it's, you know, we talk about doing election law, like, for example, one initiative, you know, you would think it would be a big fight, but we have a bill that Representative Polanda is carrying, who is in leadership. And what it does, and I've been trying to get some headway on this for years, but all it really does is says that if you show up in person, the Board of Elections, to vote prior to Election Day, you can be treated as the same way that you're voting on Election Day. Currently, you have to fill out an absentee ballot. Now you could just come in there and vote on the screen. You could actually, you know, change your vote. You don't have to fill out paper and screw things up, which has been a big problem. People would double bubble. People would, you know, fill out the header wrong, and they're done. They're screwed. This would give them a chance to vote in person, and it would get scanned, of course, because we have the optical scan here in Hamilton County.
Correct. And
it would go into, you know, like compact flash or something, and it would then be tabulated but not counted. Right. Until obviously 7:30 on Election Day. But what this does is that for the Board of Elections, they don't have this massive mountain of absentee ballots that they physically have to go through. They can just plug it in and whoop, there we go, it's counted. The issue, I think, with this legislation will probably be that since you're treating it the same way as, you know, voting on Election Day, you have the ID. That part of it, now granted, we are working on that because we don't want this issue is a convenience issue. It's a money-saving issue. We don't want it to get clouded with all of the, you know, voter ID stuff. And we are working with the Democrats on this. But I mean, not exactly riveting stuff. But to some people, the boards of election, it saves them tens of thousands of dollars. They don't have to hire a lot of additional staff. So that's just one thing we're looking at.
And that's on just one day. You know, here you are going progressively through for our time frame that we have once early voting does occur and everything else. You know, there was always that fear that we would lose early voting. Do you think that will eventually happen, or do you think we're going to continue on with this track of early voting?
I think early voting, and I understand a lot of people have issues with it, is here to stay, quite frankly, because it's popular. It's, you know, the demand, the number of people that are voting absentee is growing. You know, it makes it easier for the elderly to be able to vote instead of actually having to physically be there. So no, I don't think that it's going away. It just needs to be, in my opinion, ensured that there's no fraud, that it works efficiently. If we can do that, I think we're in a good place.
Do you feel that early voting has, as you said, with the elderly and others getting out there on a progressive scale as opposed to one day only, do you find that it is actually increasing the amount of voters because they don't, again, it's the infamous,
I'm sure
it's a Tuesday, it's a Tuesday in November and it's raining or snowing, so X number of people aren't going out. Do you feel that we're seeing that political process actually being used and working?
Absolutely. Yes, I think it has increased turnout, but I don't think that it has necessarily you know, affected one party or another.
Sure.
When we passed online voter registration this past General Assembly, there was, you know, fear that, oh my God, everybody's going to, you know, this is going to be a big mess. Well, it turns out that California, for example, according to the Pew Trust, the number of registrations for Democrats outnumbered Republicans 3-1. You go to Utah, it was 4-1 in favor of Republicans. Why? Because that's the makeup of California and that's the makeup of Utah.
Correct.
All it really did was increase the number of people that were registering more or less in proportion to the number of people or the makeup of the actual state. So, I think at the end of the day, the early absentee voting is popular. The online registration will also be popular, but we have to be very careful about making sure that there's, no fraud. It's very secure, and Secretary of State Husted has been, very instrumental in ensuring that as well.
And you were going to the next area that I was talking about. Security is vital to this.
Yes.
Fraud has always been, like I said, it's been that very fearful word. We don't want that to happen. That's that dirty, nasty little taste in your mouth that
Sure.
no one wants that, and that's what makes everything wrong. But the security of it, making sure that not only is your information secure, but your vote and everything that goes along with it is safe as well.
Absolutely, and it's worth also pointing out that that's actually the part that we can deal with and can handle. Things like Golden Week, some of the and actually like reducing the number of days of absentee voting. There have been numerous court challenges and decisions saying you can't do this or you can't do that. Golden Week, of course, was appealed after the General Assembly lost, but then the appeals court had said no, this is fine. It's very easy to vote in Ohio. You have a month to do absentee voting, so no big deal. But I think if we tried to say, all right, we're going to scale it back to 1 day again, wouldn't happen. It would be challenged, and I think it would be upheld.
And I can't see. I agree with you. I can't see that happening, especially after past. You talk about, obviously, election law is important, but you're saying alcohol law is important as well. We're talking about restrictions as well as other ideas in that realm. Where do you see that going? I mean, obviously, that's going to be a little more active than the previous.
I don't really know with alcohol policy. It's been fairly quiet towards the end of the General Assembly. But then again, a lot was done last General Assembly with regards to alcohol policy. I know that Ohio went from having a 12% cap on beer up to really no limit. Obviously there's the entertainment districts.
And there's many brewers who are thankful for that.
Absolutely, yeah. And there was changes to, definitions here of, who's a small brewer and who's not. There's a lot of things that have changed. So I don't know where we're going necessarily this General Assembly. There were some things in the budget about how alcohol is taxed that are changing, but that's a budget issue. It wouldn't be going to my committee.
And many of those items that we were just speaking on, you don't believe those were very reactionary. I mean, obviously, craft brewery and things like that are very much in the trend right now, and I don't foresee them going to the wayside at any time. I think they're going to expand in many different creative means. That's why I'm asking that it was not something created just because, well, they're doing, let's jump on this and get a hold of these people so before they get out of control, those crazy brewers.
Yes.
Considering this area was known for its brewing back in the day, and I think we're starting to see that golden age again.
Yes. No, I would agree with you look at where we are today versus 15 years ago when I was first able to start drinking. The number of choices that are out there for beer and wine and other things, I mean, bourbon, is just incredible. And we've been trying to evolve our laws in Ohio, which many of them have been, are dated around Prohibition era.
And that's what
so it has to be updated. But again, we've got to be careful because you don't want, things to really get out of hand. So we're going to be careful, but I would imagine there are probably a few things that'll pop up.
I can imagine. You are watching the Columbus Report here on Waycross Community Media. I'm speaking with Representative Lou Blessing here from the 29th District. Hope that you are enjoying our program this evening. We've just been going over, of course, your chair position in the House Government Accountability and Oversight Committee, but you've also got 3 other committees that you are a part of: Finance, Ways and Means, and Rules and References.
Correct.
How has that? I mean, obviously, you've some of these sound a little familiar to most people, but how do you feel with knowing that you got 4 committees on your back here now?
Well, I would point out that you could almost argue it's 3.5 in the sense that Rules and Reference is an extremely fast-moving committee. You have your reference report that will list what bills are going to what committees, and you approve that. It's really not, all that intensive a committee. Although they did expand the number of members that are on it. I think there's somewhere between, it might be 15 members or so on there. It never used to be that many. But nothing wrong with that at all. The others are certainly an eye-opener for me. Ways and Means, which does tax policy, has been relatively light. We only have 1 bill in there, and it deals with conforming our tax law with our definition of adjusted gross income with that of the federal definition of adjusted gross income. Very non-controversial. It's done every 2 years to ensure that tax returns aren't all hectic and messed up. And there's really going to be no controversy with that. It always passes with no issues. Finance, on the other hand, has been just whoa, you're going 100 miles per hour here. I mean, we've started committee, I think, at the end of January, and they have been very long committees, very involved testimony, and the budget bill, of course, is, like any year, a massive bill. It's 3,500 pages at this point. And it will probably grow as
I was going to say,
I think
we've talked about it this in the past. It is an ever-growing document until it is approved. But that is something that we should probably touch upon.
Yes,
Just some highlights here. The budget, as always, is something very tricky, I believe, because you obviously want to make sure that everybody gets what they need.
Yes.
But that doesn't always happen.
Correct. Yes. So to really just to back up here and go over the budget process, it starts with 4 different bills. Well, actually, the governor starts with his big main budget bill that LSC drafts, and the chair of the House Finance Committee is the one that will officially introduce the bill on behalf of the governor. It's just tradition. There's 4 different bills. You have the transportation budget, you have the BWC budget, you have the Industrial Commission budget, and the main operating. The main operating budget is the one that everybody talks about that has over 90% of the appropriations, GRF or otherwise. But that one we actually have to pass at the end of June because the fiscal year starts July 1st. And the others have to be passed at the end of March because of the 90-day layover rule for legislation, unless it contains a current appropriation, which the main operating budget bill does, so that is effective immediately. Now, the House will generally deliberate over it between February and March, have an omnibus amendment because otherwise there would be 6,000 individual amendments, which would take forever in committee to get through, so it's one big omnibus amendment. Voted out at the end of March. Senate gets it April through May, does the same thing. And then, technically we could concur with Senate amendments. It never happens. Goes to conference committee. Get it out of conference committee. Pass that on the House floor. Goes to the governor. He does his line item veto for the things he didn't like, and it becomes law. That's pretty much the thrust of it. Right now, we are just hearing from a lot of the agencies. I heard from Tim Keene, director of the Office of Budget and Management, the governor's office. He went over the lay of the land. And, I might add, budget has to be balanced.
Correct.
The main operating budget.
Yes.
So we do have a balanced budget amendment here in Ohio from way back when. So yes, it has to be balanced. But Tim Keene gave testimony first. And then it's gone from him. He did also the K through 12 portion of it, in addition to Paulo de Maria with ODE. And we also had Testa from taxation go in there. And then there was quite a panel for Medicaid because it's quite an issue.
It's quite an issue, yes.
But there are quite a few, actually, I had to write them down. I would point out that the budget at 3,500 pages, if you can memorize all of that and speak to all of it, my hat's off to you. I wish I could be you, because it is.
Yeah, I was going to say, because at that point you should be up. They should be up there and not.
It is amazing. But the big ones here with education, we'll start with that.
Sure.
The one that most people look at is the foundation formula, and that's the money that the state gives back to the local school districts. We had the DeRolf's decision back in the late '90s that said that hey, school districts should have this similar funding model. No district should get shortchanged. We didn't really change the formula, or I shouldn't say we. The governor's proposal has not changed versus last General Assembly. There were 2 tweaks. Okay. One was the transportation calculation change for busing. There's the minimum state share is going from 50% to 37.5% in 18 and 25% in 19. Why? And this is because the wealthier districts have been disproportionately benefiting from this. So, for example, if they were getting 4%, for example, from the state, or that was their share, they have to be bumped up to 50% automatically, even though they're a very wealthy district. And it was one of the things that KSIC looked at and decided, hey, this isn't necessarily fair. Small, but it's a fix that they wanted to do. The controversial issue, at least in our talks in committee, was this idea of the transitional aid, which is the guarantee, and the gain cap. So what's going on now is that they are looking at average daily membership for the schools for the past 5 years. So it's 2011 to 2016. They would have numbers to say, hey, what is your enrollment looking like? If you lost no more than 5% of your enrollment or gained enrollment, you're fine.
But anything
if it's between 5 and 10%, there's a sliding scale that you actually lose foundation funding. And prior to that, that was never the case. Right. You would never go backwards with the foundation funding. If you're above 10%, you're capped. It's a maximum of 5% that you would lose. And one of the reasons why, at least with Tim Keene explaining this, is that it should not be tied to prior results. You could have, I'm trying to think of a good way to explain this. He just basically felt that the money should follow the student. If you have a school district that has lost students, do they need all the money that they were getting in the past? It's an argument that can be made. We're discussing it. Both sides are they're butting their heads over this, but we'll see.
It's interesting that he says he states that the money should follow the student, and again with the idea that many districts now have open enrollment and other places for them to go, I can see where there can be some discrepancy with what people are saying. This is our district, that money should be going to our district, but the child doesn't go to that district any longer.
Correct.
And so I can see, and it kind of goes with the idea of where a lot of people don't vote school ideas and levies because either they don't have somebody there or my child doesn't go to that district.
That is true. But I would also point out that with this, this is only one factor that's being looked at here.
Sure.
With regards to looking at the formula. So it's not as bad as it may seem. I know a lot of school districts are going to be up in arms about it. But then there's the gain cap, which basically works in reverse. You can't get more than 5% than you got last year. And to a degree, it makes some sense in that, what if you had before a school that, in practice, I don't believe this would ever happen, but if you had 100% gain in students, you would get a tremendous amount of extra funding, and then you lost those 100% of students, you can't get knocked down, so you have this influx of money. Again, not happening in practice, but I can see why the cap goes hand in hand with the transitional aid. Whether it's good policy or not, we still need to let the subcommittee do its work, which I am on, and I will report back.
Excellent.
When I hear better or more things from it. But there are other things that that impact those foundation dollars, and there are 4 big ones. You have district income levels that they look at, property valuations, the state share index, which is 3-year average valuation per pupil relative to statewide average. It's a measure of capacity, how much money you can raise locally, and of course population shifts, which is that new ADM issue that we just discussed. And really, that's it thus far. For that, there's some other things.
I'm sure there are other things they'll continue. It sounds as if the state is actually looking district by district of exactly how are these children being funded. How as it goes back, dollar to the child, and then it equates to that district. I mean, I can see how this is sort of working, and I can also see where it can anger a lot of individuals. Oh, yeah. Obviously, we are still very preliminary in what's going on.
Yes.
As you said, we will report back.
Subject to change.
Yeah, the ever popular comment that is. But it's true. I think things will probably shift in that. It is, especially with what's going on educationally. I can see that, especially with our districts here. You know how things.
Yep.
Are definitely in a flux.
It's funny you should bring that up. We have the numbers for Northwest Local, and Northwest Local, is not losing money, but they're not gaining money. They're flat funded over the biennium. So, but if you look at the numbers, though, for the average daily membership, it was listed at -5%. They were right on that line. So I think when they looked at that in capacity, that's where that came out. But none of the school districts in my district actually lost any money. Cincinnati Public actually gained some money, quite a bit in 18, 2.6% increase. Southwest Local gained a small amount. Three Rivers gained a ton. But Three Rivers isn't exactly a huge school
Well, no, I was
district
just going to say it's a smaller district, but...
Right. 0.1% for the city of Cincinnati is, a fairly large number in comparison to Three Rivers Local School District. But anyway, again, all of this can change.
Exactly. That's the educational portion.
Yes. So we got, oh my God,
where
do we go?
Where else can we go?
Have,
I mean, there's plenty.
Let's see here. We will go to taxes. It'd be a good one. So the two big things here in the budget is the idea that you've probably heard in the news, the tax shifting. Mm-hmm. Income tax being reduced with an increase in the sales tax. The idea being that, at least from Tim Keene's testimony, the income tax is a punishment on investment and growth, and the sales tax, of course, is a tax on consumption. There is a body of evidence out there, at least with the publications that they produce, that says, hey, the sales tax is a less bad tax. It'll bring capital into Ohio, and we will end up getting, more revenue, even though it would be revenue neutral at the end of the day, or not revenue neutral, but like the amount of taxes would balance out.
Correct.
Whether that's true or not remains to be seen. We'll see. I should also point out that this budget is a net tax cut, although it's a very small net tax cut. The reason for that is that there's been talk of a slowdown. The revenue estimates that the Office of Budget Management have come up with have been, their revenue estimates have been lower. Mm-hmm. Still growth, but very low growth. And their argument, or one of their reasons they believe that this is the case, Ohio depends on manufacturing 50% more than the rest of the country. Fair. We're also an energy producer. As our viewers may or may not know, oil and gas have really gotten crushed over the past 2 years. Quite a bit of supply has come online. So great for consumers, but in terms of tax revenue coming in, you don't get as much. Right. So that's part of it. And then the manufacturing issue is even greater because right now we have a very strong dollar, which is great. We can buy whatever coming in from said foreign country, but our exports are that much more expensive in other countries as well. So that has led to Ohio's growth lagging the rest of the country. But otherwise, the picture is really not all that bad. Unemployment is low in Ohio, and we seem to be doing well, and they expect things to pick up in 19 and beyond. Anyway, one other issue is that, and this will probably be fairly controversial. Everybody knows where it's going to ultimately go, but we're moving from 9 to 5 tax brackets. This budget, at least with, again, the proposal, I got to be careful.
I was going to say, be careful. Exactly.
Yes. The idea being that they're going to move to a flatter tax with that. Now, that having been said, I think I know California was one of them. I think Colorado was the other. Are the only two states that have more tax brackets or the same. So going to 9 to 5 really isn't necessarily a bad thing. A lot of accountants have testified and said, look, this is something that needs to happen. So whether we make it to a flat tax, I don't know. We'll see. But based on how they shifted things around, no lower income people are going to see a major tax increase. In fact, I think it was up to 350,000 more people in Ohio are not going to be paying a personal income tax at this point, lower income people. So there's a lot in there.
I was going to say, going from a 9 to 5, sorry to use the pun, what a way to make a living. Sorry, I had to do it.
No,
but the fact is that, is this not, I'm gonna put the angel and the devil to my side here. Is this not a help? I mean, let's take a look at that. Is this not going to kind of help, as we're saying, bring that balanced scale out? Are we not going to be helping those out and that need it?
Yes. I think that's always been the goal.
Sure.
With this, there's a body of evidence that will state there's a point. Obviously, you need some taxes to bring in revenue for the state in order to provide for these services, and there's obviously way too high taxes that make things more onerous. It's finding that point on the curve where you can get the most bang for your buck and operate efficiently, and that's what I think they're trying to do with this. But we've had in Ohio, you can see that actually tax revenue has increased as we've lowered taxes, which again fits with a lot of the theory that implies if your taxes are too high, when you lower taxes, you encourage business growth, investment in a given state. With more of that and a broader tax base, of course, that will actually bring in more revenue even though your taxes are lower. That's the goal that the governor has been putting forth for now, I believe 6 years. So anyway, that's...
And looking from your standpoint, looking at your district, can you not see that this is quite possibly a larger benefit than it is a hindrance,
yes.
Especially for the constituents of your district?
Oh, absolutely, no question about it. Jobs are coming back. Now, wage growth has been kind of tepid over the past so many years, but that's not been necessarily an Ohio phenomenon. It's been a nationwide phenomenon, and in fact, many could argue that was one of the #1 stealth issues with the presidential campaign. This wasn't about jobs. This was about a pay raise. Sure. That's supposed to pick up. I think that the pro-growth policies, that we've enacted in at least the 2 terms that I've been here have been helpful. So I think we're on the right track. It's just people need to understand some of the dynamics that are going on in Ohio, as well as the nation and the world. We're all connected.
Oh, absolutely.
So.
I think that's one thing that we've always said here on the show is that, it always starts locally and it will always go broadly. And if you don't understand where you're coming from here, you probably will not understand the global impact that it may have later.
Correct. Some other points of interest here. They're going to come back for the tobacco increase. So it's 160 to 225 a pack. I bring that up only because with my district, bordering Indiana and Kentucky, these issues are very germane. Same with the sales tax increase, going from 5.75 to 6.25%. To offset the income tax reduction.
Right.
Again, that can drive people to Indiana and Kentucky to do their shopping. Difference is that Indiana actually has a higher sales tax than we do. Kentucky, by going to 6.25%, we're 1/4% higher than they are. How much of an impact that is, I cannot say. You're going to have to get some economists in here to say that, to testify. I don't know.
In quick view, I can see someone saying, well, my sales tax is higher, therefore I'm going elsewhere. However, is it worth getting in your car with the gas, driving out there, your time, just to save a percentage?
That's correct.
So, I mean, I'm hoping that people might see that, but again, it does go back to helping your area and the place in which you live.
That's right. I totally agree, and that with the tobacco tax, that's going to be more of a tricky issue, I think, than the sales tax, simply because $1.60 to $2.25 a pack. You keep increasing this, and I don't think the state, at least the governor's office, is really looking at this as a revenue issue. I think he's looking at this as he just wants to stop smoking, which is what it does sound to be,
yes. Without it becoming an initiative, a statewide initiative of ban this or do that, and I don't think that's what he wants to say. But by doing something in this means, it does lead one to believe.
That's correct, and I think his argument with this is, and again, I can't say whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, but the fewer people that are smoking, the fewer Medicaid caseloads that we have, because generally speaking, a tax, and you'll hear both sides of the aisle say this, a tax on cigarettes is actually a tax on the poor, because the people that smoke are generally lower income. The difference is that we have to pay for the Medicaid, and smoking is one of those things that really increases the cost of health care. So, if you reduce smoking, and then the revenues that come in because of fewer people picking up a pack of smokes and starting, also is going to drop Medicaid caseloads, which is less money that we have to spend on it, which technically can be seen as an increase in revenue. Where that all plays out, I don't know. We will find out. I don't even know if the proposal will make it through the House or the Senate. We'll see.
Again, things
are
all
always
still
churning.
in flux, so to speak.
And on that topic of Medicaid, this is the last big piece. There were two things in there on Medicaid, and spending, at least from our standpoint in the state, has actually been relatively tame, manageable. I feel like the all-funds spending has definitely gone up a lot, specifically in 2014 and 15 because of the Medicaid expansion. But be that as it may, there are two issues that we are dealing with that you'll probably hear about in the news. One of them definitely have, and that's the Medicaid Managed Care Organization sales tax that Hamilton County has always piggybacked on.
Yes.
That. So the way this worked was that the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, the federal level, said, look, you can't do this sales tax on Medicaid managed care organizations to draw down federal matching dollars. As you know, Medicaid matching dollars from the feds is a huge portion of our Medicaid dollars. In fact, I think it's 64-36 is the split. 64% from the feds, 36% from us. Medicaid, looking at all funds, is over half of our budget. I mean, it's a huge, huge, huge amount. So we were told that we can't do that anymore. So what they're doing now is they're saying, all right, we're going to have this health insuring corporation provider assessment that they're going to levy on the Medicaid HICs and then the non-Medicaid HICs. I think for the Medicaid HICs, it's like $26 to $52 per member per month, and $1 or $2 for the non-Medicaid HICs. Now, doing that allows us to draw down the federal dollars, but those federal dollars now have to go to a separate fund. They're not going into GRF. And this new provider assessment that we levy also goes into a separate fund, not the GRF. So this is seen as a major sales tax loss to the GRF, and by extension, the local taxing authorities, transit authorities, they can't levy the sales tax anymore. And I think Hamilton County was a $14 or $15 million loss to them on this. I think part of it was with the Fed saying, look, it's a nice gimmick you have, but if we're going to be spending all this money, we expect you to spend it this way.
And that being said, you are saying that these new varying funds are specific to that. They go nowhere else but to the funding.
Yes, they refer to the provider assessment fund that this goes into as a designated purpose fund, which it's pretty clear what that's going to go to, Medicaid.
Just to make sure, because as you know, many of our viewers can get concerned, especially wanting to know where dollars are going to go and where dollars are going to be spent. And it's very important to make sure that...
That's correct. And I would point out, for Hamilton County losing the $14 to $15 million, the way this is going to work is that Tim Keene and the Office of Budget Management realized that, hey, this is a lot for like a county to absorb. They understand that money will be appropriated so that they, aren't going to take the hit. They're going to be more or less weaned off of what they, had in years past. But again, it should be pointed out that counties have only been able to do this since 2010, so this hasn't been a long-standing 30, 40, 50-plus year.
Right. It's not something that's going to be a very hard Band-Aid to rip off. Yes, it's going to sting a bit, but it's nothing that has been so ingrained in an institution that it's going to be so hard to recover from.
That's correct. And the alternative was that and I think, I don't know if Hamilton County weighed in on this. I have to find out. But the alternative to doing the provider assessment was the idea of a 7% increase on all these managed care organizations. The problem is people's premiums would have went up, Medicaid or otherwise, and I don't think the governor's people felt that was a viable option at this point. So something to keep in mind as we go along, because what the county has and they're getting from the sales tax is revenue and money that they can spend elsewhere. Without that, it impacts people's daily lives here and the services that they've come to expect. So we'll see how this plays out. I have a former colleague on the County Commission in Denise Treehouse,
yes.
Chris Monzel and Todd Portune, to talk to about this, and I'm sure they'll be reaching out at some point when money's involved.
Absolutely, and especially, again, as it is affecting those who are your district as well as the county, as you're saying. So, again, statewide initiatives do make difference here within the county.
That's right. One more issue.
And we'll do this quickly because we are meeting the bottom of the hour.
And I will make it quick. This was the one. This is the controversial one that people have, there's been some fights in committee over this, but I think people are coming around to the idea that this kind of needed to happen. And this is the idea of the personal responsibility component to being on Medicaid. And when I say personal responsibility, this does not mean that people are going to be paying through the nose. And what it's going to mean is that they're going to have to pay a premium for their care. I guess similar to a copay.
Sure.
The number that Tim Keene used was $20, but that was an average that they had projected. It is actually capped at 2% of household income. So this is not going to be a major hit, and it has actually been pointed out when they did polling, they did interviews, the press was asking about this. A lot of people that were on Medicaid, the fact that they have insurance now, prior to the expansion they didn't have it, are now looking at it as, okay, we can pay this. This isn't the end of the world. So there's, for the group that it's affecting, they're okay with this. So I don't know that this is going to be the fight that people think it may be.
Sure. Because
the people that are being impacted on this understand that this is kind of the price to pay with it. And it brings in, I think the figure was $270 million to the state, which is helpful.
And again, these are things that we will be watching grow and change. We are almost out of our time here, so I do want to get all the information out. Of course, if you want to get a hold of Mr. Blessing and discuss these items further before we meet again, it's at 77 South High Street on the 13th floor in Columbus, 43215. Give a phone call at 614-466-9019 or rep29@ohiohouse.gov, the email to send something out to him. Mr. Blessing, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We will definitely discuss the items as they change and anything new that comes up in the coming months when we return back here and when we have warmer weather.
Very good.
Thank you for coming, and I want to thank you for joining us as well. You've been watching the Columbus Report here on Waycross Community Media. I'm Jason Grisgoric, Waycross Community Media's Government Access Coordinator, giving you the opportunity to talk to those in the know from the state here on the Columbus Report. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next month.